What I'm about to present to you over the next 8 weeks looks absolutely, positively, nothing like I planned when I first said I was going to do a series with the backdrop of dragons. My original idea was this: How to Train Your Dragon. It is an awesome movie. In it, there's an island called Berk where Viking-like people lived, and the island is constantly dealing with dragons. They were doing their best to defend their island against the creatures. They had written an entire handbook on how to do battle with dragons. Enter Hiccup. I didn't name him, but he's the leader's son. He doesn't want to fight dragons. He develops a relationship with one, and, well, as that relationship develops, it eventually leads to, well, the people learning to live with their dragons. And with this as my backdrop, if anybody's hung out with us for a while, you know where my brain was headed. Man, we were going to have dragons flying from the speakers and maybe around the little... I had this whole thing. We were going to turn this entire stage into the island of Berk, and we were going to talk about how to train your dragon. Cool movie. Awesome movie. Made a cute sermon series. Unfortunately, it's lousy doctrine. Because in this series, sin is the dragon. And I think the scenario that I just described is how we, the church, are dealing with sin today. We've grown tired of fighting sin. So, well, somewhere along the way, we began to make deals and concessions. In essence, what we're trying to do is we're trying to train our sin so it's bearable, so I can live with it. But let's talk about reality. What's happening is sin is training us how we're supposed to live. And that's not what this sermon series is about. I don't want to teach you how to live with your sin. I want to teach you just how dangerous it is. I want to teach you just how destructive it is. And in the end, I want to teach you just how deadly it is. Hey, that's 3D sin. That would have made a cool picture too, right? We could have done that. We could have got the glasses. We could have done, but that's not what we're going to do either, because I don't want you to get distracted by all the cartoons and some of the stuff that we like to do. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just didn't seem appropriate. So I packed away all the cartoons and the stuffed animals and all the decorations. Notice I didn't say I packed away all the videos, okay? There's something that goes with it. But in the end, when we're all done talking about sin, my goal, I'm going to teach you how to slay it. That's the name of this sermon series. It is Dragon Slayer. And when I say that, that's scary, right? I mean, I'm afraid of dragons. Okay, not really. But I know somebody who used to be. When Caleb was little, he was deathly afraid of dragons. Now, if you don't know who Caleb is, he is our oldest son. Benji, your stories are coming later. He's all grown up now. Yours are coming right behind his. He was deathly afraid of dragons. And one year, we were headed to Myrtle Beach for vacation, and, well, when they were out, my wife and him were out there looking at things to do at Myrtle Beach on vacation, they came across a place called Dragon's Lair.
Once upon a time, the maidens were fair, the knights brave, and dragons breathed fire. Dragon's Lair Fantasy Golf takes you back to the Middle Ages as you meander through the ramparts of a medieval castle, witness fiery volcanic explosions, and come face to face with a 30-foot fire-breathing dragon. 36 holes of fun and adventure for the entire family. Open day and night. Dragon's Lair Fantasy Golf, located at Broadway at the Beach in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Now, before you decide, oh, I'm going to Myrtle Beach and play dragon golf, the dragon died during COVID. Sorry, COVID got him, and Dragons Golf is no longer there anymore. But it's a cool place because on the course, you're actually winding through this little maze, and you're playing golf, and at various times, this dragon pops up to taunt you and kind of challenge you a little bit. And well, they saw the pictures, and all the way down to Myrtle Beach, this is what we heard. I'm going to play dragon golf. I'm going to play dragon golf. And you understand, this is the kid that doesn't sleep in the car. So literally, it's all the way down to Myrtle Beach. I'm going to play dragon golf. I'm going to play dragon golf. I guess he was challenging himself to face his fears. And we get down there, and the first night we get to the hotel. Are we going to go play dragon golf? No. We're going to check into the hotel. We're going to go to the grocery store. We're going to get our groceries. We're going to go to sleep, and you're going to go to the beach tomorrow, and tomorrow night you can go play dragon golf. And we did. We went to play dragon golf, and we went over there, and I bought the tickets, and we got our clubs, and we had Benji. He was in a stroller at that time, and so Deborah's like, well, I'm going to take Benji. I don't want to take him in there. Y'all just go play. So me and Caleb, off we went into the dragon's lair. And we got to hole number 1, and that dragon popped up. And I learned something very valuable. I was unaware that 4-year-olds could run that fast. Caleb dropped his club, and he dropped his balls right where they were, and he took off. And by the time I caught up with Caleb, he's outside the golf place, hiding behind Benji's stroller, clutching to Mom's legs. There is no way he's going back in to face the dragon. And you know what? It all looks so cool and innocent. But as he's standing there, he didn't have the happy face that you see in the advertisement on the internet. He was afraid. But from his fear, he learned a couple of very valuable lessons that I want to pack up and take into this sermon series. Lesson number 1. The pictures on the internet paled in comparison to the real dragon. I mean, when there are little thumbnails and little pictures and little colorful things out there, and you look at that, and you're like, well, that's not so bad. That looks kind of cool. That looks kind of neat. A real dragon right there, and he's going to come out and breathe fire and smoke. But when you got there, and 4-year-old, do you really understand how big 30 foot is? These ceilings are about 24. That's a big dragon. And so what he thought he was going to experience had nothing to look like what he actually saw. And you know what? Talking about facing the dragon was much easier than facing the dragon. Brave child in the car riding down to Myrtle Beach when he's 8 hours away. I'm going to play dragon golf. I'm going to play dragon golf. I'm going to play dragon golf. Not so brave when you're standing at hole number 1 and there's a literal smoke-breathing, fire-breathing dragon challenging you. And they're important lessons for us because we can make some lessons when it comes to the idea of sin. Looking at sin pales in comparison to facing your sin. I can look at sin all the time, can't I? I sin, there you are. It's all around me. But somehow looking at sin is not the same as facing my sin. Lesson number 2 that you got to take with you. Talking about sin is easier than dealing with your sin. I told you last week that there are 144,000 sermons about Jesus on this place called SermonCentral.com. Just so you know, there's 114,000 sermons about sin. There are a lot of sins. There's a lot of talk out there about sin. We like to talk about sin. Sin is something that we need to think about, ponder about. But it's a lot easier to talk about it than to actually do something about it. I mean, how many sermons do you think you've heard over the years about sin? How many Bible verses have you heard about sin? And the question is if I've heard so much, why do I still struggle? And I know your answer. It's real simple, Barry. I'm a sinner. And you know the problem I have with that statement? That's how to train your dragon mentality. I am a sinner, therefore I sin. And there's nothing I can do about it. I am a sinner, don't you understand? That is what we do. So ponder this for just a second. Do you sin because you're a sinner, or did you become a sinner because you sinned? There's a big difference. You see, the reality is, the reason we don't want to really deal with it is because, really and truly, I like my sin. I do. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it, right? It can be quite entertaining at times and quite fun and quite pleasurable at times. And let's face it, really and truly, I don't want to deal with it. It's a lot easier just to learn to live with it, right? I mean, God can forgive everything. So why do I need to deal with my sin? This sermon series is going to set this concept of I am a sinner kind of on its head. Because today, we're going to come face to face with 5 simple facts about sin. Now, this is an introductory sermon. We're just getting started. Okay? So there is a long ways to go, so just know this is like we're at hole number 1. The dragon ain't even out yet. We're just holding there with our club and with our balls, and we're ready to play the game. We're at the beginning, but I got to tell you some of the facts and the rules about sin. So here's fact number 1. Everybody has sin. Romans chapter 3, verse 23 says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." It's a short statement. It's a simple statement. And believe it or not, when it comes to church, this is probably one thing that 99%, actually 99.9999% of the church people will admit. Everybody has sin. I don't care what denomination you are or what church you go to or whether it's a city church or a country church. Everybody has sin because in the back of my mind, I know. Nobody's perfect. Don't you say that all the time? Romans chapter 3, verse 10 says, "As it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one." So I know this is a relative and a real sermon series for each and every one of us because there is nobody sitting here in the building today, nobody online, nobody that's going to catch this sermon series later, nobody can ever look at this and say, I don't have that problem. Everybody has sin. Me? You? The police officer that pulled you over to give you the ticket for speeding? By the way, I wouldn't point that out to him at that point. But you understand, everybody struggles with this sin. Fact number 2. Your sin is real sin. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. And I know what you're thinking. Duh. You just said everybody's a sinner, and I'm somebody. And so since I'm somebody and everybody has sin, it's obvious. I got to have sin. I get that. Do you? The thing is that we have some really interesting things these days that we call sin. Sometimes we call them addiction and disease. Now, I want to make sure everybody hears this loud and clear. I am not discounting addiction, and I am in no way, shape, or form saying that disease is caused by sin. That's not the point. The point I want to make here, though, is that sometimes we have sin in our life, and instead of calling it sin, we slap another label on it. I can't help it. I'm addicted. I've got an illness. And so we slap the label on it, and that is our attempt to say, I don't have to face that. It ain't real sin. After all, I can't help myself. Sometimes we use this as our label that we put over us. It's just who I am. Really? No, it's not. Go all the way back to the beginning of our year when we did the Soul of the Matter sermon series and we talked about who you are. You are a person that is fearfully, wonderfully made in God's image. And guess what? That's not who you are. Your sin does not define you. Here's the fact. Until we're willing to call it what it is, then it's not real sin. It's not real sin. It's not real. I mean, if I can just discount it as I can't help myself, I can just discount it as that's how God made me, then you know what? I never have to look at it. I never have to deal about it. Yeah, we can talk about it, and we can bring it home, and it becomes a cute little pet that walks through my house, and we go, "Aw, isn't it sweet?" We don't see it for the monster it is because we don't want to call it sin. We just want to learn to live with it. And maybe right about now you're thinking, well, this dragon that I've got is a lot bigger than I thought it was. I thought my dragon would be like pint size. I know what mine looks like. You're like, we don't have a building high enough. I got some big dragons in my life that I struggle with. And I know you probably do too. That's what makes this sermon series so important. Fact number 3. All sin is equal. And if you go here and you've been here for a while, you're thinking, I wonder when this verse was going to get to the screen this year. We haven't seen it this year. We see this verse every year at least once. For whoever keeps the whole law yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking it all. I have a very good friend, a very respected friend, somebody that I love to listen to, I love to talk to, and we were having a conversation. And well, it was just a general conversation, and it wasn't a theological debate or anything. And the statement was made that I believe in my heart of hearts that God has a special place for people that, and then they fill in the blank with the sin that they struggle with the most. Not that they struggle with the way that it's taught in the world. And I think I deserve a little gold star because my head didn't literally explode. And that's kind of what I felt like, and I wanted right then to have this big deal, but I realized it was an innocent statement made. I realized exactly what it was, but I do get it. We don't think our dragons are real dragons because our dragons aren't that sin. I can always find somebody's sin who I think is worse than mine, and therefore, since somebody's got one that's worse than mine, then mine ain't no big deal. I hate to tell you this, when it comes to heaven, there is no coach in first class. And when it comes to hell, there is no dungeon and there is no basement. There's 2 spots. There's 2 directions. And God says, if you've even broken one, I'm talking about when you were like 5 years old, you palmed a piece of bubble gum from the convenience store and you stuck it in your pocket and you got away with it. God sees no difference in that sin than he does, and you went out and you stole a car. But it was little. You get it, right? That's the myth. That's the myth. We have a mythology about our sin that it doesn't really exist because there's so much else out there. Mine can't be that important. I never killed anybody. Come on, God. It's so little. Unfortunately, when we don't see all sin as equal, we get the idea of judgment, according to Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 through 5. Why do you look at a speck of sawdust in your brother's eyes and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when at times there is a plank in your own eye, and you hypocrite? First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Should I go cut the air on? Because I think maybe it's just getting a little hot in here, right? Really, my sin is that? I'm trying to judge the world and get specks out of people's eyes, and I got a 2x4 sticking out the side of my head. God said, hey, your sin is just as real as theirs, and your sin is just as bad as theirs. I don't know if I'm going to like this sermon series or not. This sounds like it's going to be hard. It is. That's why I saved it for the end of the year. Fact number 4. All sin is about choice. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. We're going to spend next week discussing the origin of your sin. Ooh. Yeah, not just the origin of sin, the origin of your sin. So just for now, let's just keep this simple. I want you to know today that the devil didn't make you do it. It's not mommy and daddy's fault. It's not because of the circumstances you were raised in. Now, all of those things may have contributed to your sin and leading you down the path. But that is not sin. Sin is about choice. Sometimes we just don't get this. The cause of my sin is not temptation. Because even the worst temptation, according to the verse that you got on the screen there, God says, I made a way out. There's a choice. Pornography. The computer does actually have an off switch. I know. I've worked with them for years. Alcohol abuse. The bottle has a top, folks. Greed. You can always say enough is enough. Sexual sin. I learned this one when I was working with teenagers all those years. You can always keep your clothes on. We used to have the thing in the vans when we took kids places. I called it the 6-inch rule. If a boy and girl were sitting next to each other on the bus, 6 inches between you, somebody asked me one day why. I'm like, because I'm guaranteed 6 inches of distance means nothing can happen. There's always a way out. And I get it. It's hard. It's hard. Because it's all out there, but you do get it. Remotes have buttons. Arguments can be walked away from. And at the very least, believe it or not, you may not know this. I'm learning this fact. Your mouth actually has a shut position. You get it. Your sin is not based on what you're being tempted. Your sin is based off of how you choose to respond to the temptation. There is always another choice. I just have to be willing to make it. And that is hard. Fact number 5. There we go. All sin is deadly. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Christ Jesus our Lord. Now I want to make sure you get this. This is not about physical death. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27 says, just as people are destined to die once, and after that face the judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many. And he will appear a second time, not to bear the sin, but bring salvation to those who are awaiting him. Here's what you need to take out of this. There is no okay sin. There is no sin that you get up there to what we call the pearly gates, and I don't know what they're going to look like. I don't know if they're gates or another conversation for another day. I don't know, but you don't get there and say, well, God, that's such a little sin. You get it. All of it. All of it. All sin has consequences. Now, I know how we think about that. We're going to spend a whole entire week talking about this idea that sin has consequences. By the way, I need to remind you, this is a sermon series, not a sermon. So if you catch one and miss the others, this was designed to all fit together as one piece. Now, I know exactly what you're going to say. Yeah, but all sin is deadly, but I got my grace shield, right? And I got God's grace, and I'm standing, I'm hunkered down behind God's grace shield. And I got mine too. As a matter of fact, we're going to spend an entire week talking about the sin to grace quotient. You're not going to like the math. But that's another sermon for another day. Right now, this is what I need you to know. We're sin addicts. And we're grace addicts. Sometimes we try to sin enough to see how much God can cover. And we just keep going and going and going and going, and we think God gave us a blank check. Well, there are some things that I need you to remember. These aren't new concepts. I know we've talked them before. This is called a refresher course. Remember the first promise God ever made? If you don't, here's what it is. Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. But you must not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will certainly die. That's what God told Adam and Eve all the way back at the beginning. He said, don't eat of it. And if you do, there's a consequence. And you know what? That's exactly what happened. Genesis chapter 3, verse 7. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. The moment sin entered into the world, Adam and Eve knew something changed. Now, the moment they ate whatever fruit, the knowledge of good and evil, I don't think it was an apple, because apples are still here, and I don't think there's anything that's bad about apples, but I don't know why we pictured it as an apple. I don't know. It probably has something to do with Snow White. I have no idea. But it's not, the moment they bit into that fruit, it was instantaneous. They realized something changed. Oh my gosh, I have no clothes on. Well, they had no clothes on before. Something died. Now, they didn't physically drop over dead there in the garden, thus none of us would be here. But you do understand. It was immediate. And God said, I can't accept that. And something inside of Adam and Eve died the day that they sinned. So we have to have a solution, and there's the third thing that I want you to remember. Your sin was such a problem that God allowed Jesus to die. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. But God demonstrates his love for us by us, and try it again. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, while I'm still sinning, Christ died for me. That's important. Of course, now I have to ask a question. How arrogant are we? We bring our dragons home. We pretty them up and give them cute little names. We create a special place in our lives for them to reside. We allow it to live with us like pets and even possibly a member of the family. We dedicate our resources to them so they can live long, healthy lives. We parade them around like proud parents showing off their child. And we protect them like they're precious. How arrogant are we, folks, when it comes to our sin? You want to make people upset? Just preach like this. Because now I'm in territory that you don't want me being in. Because you know God's word says what it says. See, when it comes to my sin, oftentimes I forget the blood-stained cross of Calvary. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. He did this to demonstrate his righteousness because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. There was a time that, sin was what it was. If you committed a sin, if you had sin in your life, and you wanted to have it reconciled with God, what you would do is you would go and you would get a bull or a lamb or a goat or whatever, it depends on what the sin was. And you would take it and you would parade that animal through the town because the temple or the tabernacle was in the middle of town. And then as you paraded that animal through town, everybody knew you got a sin problem because you're going to the temple and we know that animal doesn't get to come back. So that animal would be led to an altar, and there a man that they called a priest would take that animal and they would sacrifice it, and the blood would be poured out, and then they would set it on fire as an atonement for your sin. Today we don't do that. Thank goodness. Because guess what? Jesus came, and he gave his life for each and every one of us. He was led through the town. He was brought to a cross. He was nailed to that cross. He suffered, bled, and died so that I have the ability to live, here's a word, sin-free. what? I've never heard. He died so that you could live sin-free. Notice I didn't say free of sin. You're going to always struggle with sin. But here's the deal. It has to be a choice to follow him. And as you follow him, your dragon can't come along for the journey. We've got to deal with what God calls sin. So my question for you today is, now you see it, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to run from it? Are you going to hide from it? Or are you ready to try to slay it? Because I'm telling you, sin is real. It's as real as I am. Sin is dangerous. Sin is destructive to our lives. And left unchecked and left undealt with, sin is deadly. God dealt with it on Calvary. So I guess the first question we have to ask ourselves is, have you got Jesus in this battle with you?